Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of Devil's Den. We are back. There was not a game last night, but I wanted to kind of make a video for the first quarter of the NHL season for the Devils. So that's what we're gonna do. There is a game later tonight for Philadelphia, but as of right now, I wanted to make sort of a quarterly review of how I think the Devils have done so far into the season. We're about 25%, a quarter way into the season, and I kind of wanted to highlight a couple areas where I think the Devils have played really well and a couple areas where I think the Devils have played really badly. So, first things first, before we get started, if you're watching this and you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. I am hoping that we can get to, I think we're at 48 subscribers right now. We're trying to get to 50, hopefully in the next week or so, and hopefully 60 subscribers by the end of December. So, if you are watching this, you're not already subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. It would mean a lot. We're trying to grow the channel. We're very small right now. We're trying to make it a larger channel for the Devils, and so on and so forth. So, let's jump into this. First and foremost, I made some notes, so I'm going to be referencing the tablet quite a bit in this one. But I kind of wanted to go over how I think the Devils have done so far into the season. So, we're 20 games in to an 82-game season. So, we're about, like I said, 25% to a quarter of the way through their season, and the Devils are sitting, I think, third or fourth worst in the East, as well as I think second or third worst in the Metropolitan. So, in terms of playoff picture, we are not doing well whatsoever. However, one of the things I was looking into today when I was going through and making my notes for this video was that the Devils, despite being pretty low in the standings, if you actually look at where all the teams are in terms of wild card to even third of the Metropolitan, it's maybe a 2 to 3 point difference. So all the Devils really need to do is go on, I'd say a 3-4, maybe 5 game heater, do really well, get 6 to 8 points in a matter of 5 or 6 games, which I think is totally possible, especially with our upcoming schedule, and I think we'll be right back to where we are. Now, the question is, what do the Devils do in order to get back to where we were expecting this team to be come at least at this point in the season? Right? I think that I can speak for a lot of Devils fans is we did not expect us to be this low in the rankings, this low in the standings so far this season, and even just generally this season at all. I think a lot of people have been shocked at how, specifically us as Devils fans have been shocked by how not great we have, how we have not played great, and have put ourselves in a little bit of a hole. There was something that I was reading a couple of days ago about that Thanksgiving, sort of the U.S. Thanksgiving mark at the season is a very good indicator of who is and who is not going to be making the playoffs. And right now, the Devils do not seem to be playing like a playoff team. So we're going to get into that. So what does a playoff team need in order to be successful? Well, they need 3 things. They need an all-star forward core, which the Devils absolutely have, whether you're talking about Heischer or Hughes or Toffoli or Palat or Mercer or any one of the guys that really makes up our forward core. Bratt, players like this, right? And I think that on the topic of forwards, I kind of put together a list of who I think our top 3 forwards are so far this season. Now, this could be absolutely changed, even in the next 5 or 6 games. If I see a guy that's sort of elevating himself more than another guy is, then great, he moves up in my sort of ranking. So, I'm going to read off the tablet for a second, so I apologize. So, in the number 3 position, we have, in my opinion, Tyler Toffoli. So, Tyler Toffoli right now has 11 goals, 8 assists for 19 points, which is fantastic. He is our 3rd most productive scorer on the team. He was doing fantastically. I think that at one point he had like 4 or 5 goals in like 2 or 3 games. He has been a really great addition to the Devils and has been proving his offensive worth throughout the season so far. His production definitely died down with the Nico Hischier injury, with the Jack Hughes injury, and that's led to him having a -7 in plus minus. Now, when I'm looking at plus minus, obviously if you're a forward, the whole goal of your position is to score. So having a low plus minus does kind of bother me, considering that while he's had 19 points, in order for him to have a -7 plus minus, that means he would have had to been on the goal for 26 goals this season, which definitely is not a good look. Obviously, you're forwards, you're not defending, but the fact that he's a -7 plus minus is a little bit of a warrant, hence why he's number 3 on our list. Number 2 goes to, I feel like these two are really obvious ones. Number 2 is going to go to Jesper Bratt so far. He has 8 goals, 17 assists for 25 points, but unfortunately, a little bit better than Toffoli, has a -4 plus minus. So, Jesper Bratt, I think, is a obvious choice to bring up our number 2 spot, as he has the second most points on the team. Ironically, has less goals than Toffoli, which is interesting, which is going to be a trend for the number 1 spot as well. Bratt, although having less goals, has really turned into an absolutely fantastic playmaker for the Devils this year with his 17 assists, which makes up the vast majority of the amount of points that he's gotten. There was a couple of games when Hischier and Hughes were out where he sort of really stepped up, and when I was making this list, I was looking at guys who are they stepping up in the absence of guys like Hischier and like Hughes, which we will get to in a moment. So, which brings us to our number 1 spot being Jack Hughes, having 7 goals, 19 assists, 26 points with a +0 plus minus. So, the reason I put Hughes as number 1, I was seriously considering Brad. I really was. However, I think what puts him in a different category than Brad so far into just this season is his amazingly hot start that he had before he got injured. He was in conversations for the Hart. He was in conversations for like how high is this gonna go this season. And obviously, ever since he's been back, I think he's had 3 or 4 points. So he's done well since he's come back. He's been fine. But I think his rocketed hot start to the league, being number 1 in points at the time that he left for his injury, definitely makes him deserving of the number 1 spot. So, he's also the only one in my top 3 for forwards who has a positive, or I guess in this case, a neutral plus-minus rating. So, Jack Hughes gets our number 1 spot, Jesper Bratt gets our number 2 spot, and Tyler Toffoli gets our number 3 spot for our top 3 forwards, in my opinion, 20 games into the season. Now, we do have some honorable mentions. So, honorable mentions go to, we have 2. We're going to start with number 2 and then go to number 1. Number 2 being, in my opinion, Andre Palat. So, Andre Palat, so far this season, has 2 goals, 8 assists, 10 points, and a -6 plus minus. Now, obviously, the -6 does not look that great. However, the reason that I put Palat in our honorable mentions is when Hughes went down, and we had no Hischier, and we had no Hughes, I really liked the way the Palat stepped up in a big way to sort of fill that leadership role, which is exactly why we're paying Palat to be on the team. I saw him a couple of times where you had Mercer beating himself up on the bench for not being able to score goals, and I'm seeing Palat sort of be like, hey kid, it's going to be okay. He stepped up in terms of goals, and it's just, I think there was at one point where you had Hischier and Hughes out. There was a 5-game stretch where he had something like 2 goals and 3 assists. Guy was stepping up in exactly the time where we needed him to step up. Now, is the team as a whole doing well? Not really, but I liked the way he played during that stint where we needed leadership veteran guys to sort of take the reins with 2 of arguably our best players on the team down in injuries. Okay? Number 1, in my opinion, is, for honorable mentions, goes to Eric Holla, who has 6 goals, 6 goals, 6 assists for 12 points, and a +0 plus minus. So he's one of the few forwards on this Devils team right now who, besides guys like Jack Hughes, does not have a negative rating in terms of his plus minus, which means he's only been on the ice for 12 goals against, which, considering his ice time, moving from the second to the third line, really is actually quite remarkable. He has more goals than Palat. He has almost as many goals as Brad, has almost as many goals as Hughes, and I think he is a really, I'm going to say it, an underrated guy when we're talking about the firepower and star power on this Devils team. I think we always talk about guys like Hughes. We always talk about guys like Brad. We talk about guys like Toffoli. We talk about guys like Palat. We talk about guys like Mercer. We talk about guys like Holtz, who has also done fairly well this season for what we were expecting him to do. And I think that Haula doesn't get enough respect. But I think he deserves. And I think for 20 games played, guy having, just over a point every other game is something that we should admire, and I think that we should give it up for Haula. So Haula takes the number 1 spot in our honorable mentions for forwards. Now, with all the talk of the forwards, that's just one section of what a playoff-winning Stanley Cup team needs to win. You know what another section they need to win is? Defense. So, let's get into the defensemen. Now, obviously, when you have 12 guys in forwards, I chose to do 3 picks and 2 honorable mentions. For the defense, we're going to do 2 top 2 picks and 1 honorable mention because there is only 6 defensemen on the team. 7 if you call a guy out. So, let's get into this. Defense has obviously been, and I think it's totally fair for me to say, has obviously been a not great this year. Has not played great. I know that 2 of the big criticisms that everyone has had for the Devils so far has been shoddy goaltending and shoddy defensemen. And when I bring up shoddy goaltending, don't worry, we'll get to that. But let's focus on the defense first. So, the defense has obviously not played very well. I think that the goal differential for the New Jersey Devils right now is -2, which means while the defense has been shoddy at best this year, the forwards have scored enough goals to at least keep games close. We're not getting killed, 5-1, 7-2, things like that. We're losing by a goal or 2 a game and winning games by a goal or 2 here or there. We haven't had a lot of blowout games this year. So, defensemen. So like I said, I'm going to do 2 top 2 defensemen so far this year, as well as a honorable mention for defense. So, let's start with our number 2 pick for second best defenseman on the team. In my opinion, it's got to be John Marino. So, John Marino right now has 1 goal, 9 assists, 10 points. He's a -1 plus minus. Now, in case you're new to the channel and are still watching 13 minutes in, one of the things that I look for in a good defenseman is plus minus. I think it is arguably one of the most, if not the most important stat for a defenseman. How many times you're on the ice when a goal is scored as a defenseman, I think is really important. And having guys like John Marino on a team, and he's only having a -1 plus minus, when you've got guys like Dougie Hamilton, who are a -8 this year, or Brendan Smith, who are like a -10 so far this year, I think having a guy that is reliable, and if you want to talk about, how much offense he provides as a defenseman, he's got 10 points in 20 games, which means he's getting a point every other game, which is great for a defenseman. Again, what's the number 1 rule of a defenseman? Keep the puck out of the net. And the fact that he's got a better plus minus than most of the defensemen on our team, I think deserves him taking the number 2 spot so far this year. He can absolutely go up and then drop in terms of his production, in terms of how well he plays defensively. But as of right now, John Marino is my number 2 for defenseman so far. So, that's number 2. Who's number 1? Number 1 is, I feel like this is also obvious, Luke Hughes, in my opinion, is our best defenseman so far this year. In terms of plus minus, he actually has a worse plus minus than John Marino, but it's only a -2. And in comparison, I say it again, guys like Dougie Hamilton, who's got a -8, and Brendan Smith, who's got a -10 plus minus, having a young kid that is Luke Hughes has come in, and he has been consistently one of our best defensemen, is offensively productive, and I think he's been, despite playing in his rookie year, has been really great for the club. Right? We brought in guys like Hamilton. We brought in guys like Colin Miller, who also has done well while not having any points and also having a +0 plus minus, which is, great. Hasn't played a whole lot of games this year, but nonetheless, Luke Hughes takes home my number one defenseman so far. 20 games into the year, 2 goals, 11 assists, 13 points with a -2 plus minus. So he gets 13 points. He's been on the ice for 15 goals, which isn't, all that great, but I think he's been a really great addition to the team. So we've talked about our top 2 defensemen, in my opinion, which have been John Marino and Luke Hughes. Time for honorable mention. Now, this one might get me into some trouble here, but I promise you, I will attempt to justify this. So our honorable mention this year for defense is Jonas Siegenthaler. Now, I know. What has Siegenthaler done? Honestly, not a whole lot. I'll be honest with you. But if I may attempt to defend myself here, okay? I'm just going to move this out of the way. Jonas Siegenthaler has a +0 plus minus. He's a neutral, which means he has been on the ice for as many of our goals as he has been for the opponents. He has the best plus minus of any defenseman on our team. And as I have already said, I think that the amount of plus minus that a guy has on let's be clear, the Devils have been a losing team this year. Having a neutral plus minus is a really important stat. He does not have a lot of points, but again, he's a defenseman. He's not supposed to be out here scoring goals. He's supposed to defend. I say again, when you're playing like guys like Dougie Hamilton, who has a -8, supposed to be one of our best defensemen, if not our best defenseman, -8. Jonas Siegenthaler, +0. Last year, I think I talked about this quite a bit. Between Tatar, between Siegenthaler, and between Marino, had 3 of some of the best plus minus in the league. Tatar was like +42. Siegenthaler was like +35, +36. He's done a really good job at defending on a team that seems like it's just pure offense at this point. So, Jonas Siegenthaler gets my honorable mention for just having a +0 plus minus and being a quality defenseman on a team where it feels like even our defensemen want to be forwards. I'm looking at you, Brendan Smith. So, that is our forwards. That is our defense. So, which brings us to one final area, which I have had the most amount of time struggling with and kind of going back and forth, and that is our goaltending situation. So, before I get started on this, let me be crystal clear. Crystal clear. The goaltending has not been good this year. The goaltending has let this team down in definitely a lot of games this year. The goaltending needs to be better this year. It needs to be better than what we've had so far. But, and I know I can already hear people crying out, going, no, the goaltending's been shit. And I've already said the goaltending has not been good this year. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of different people in the Devils fan base, and I've had a lot of agreement and I've had a lot of disagreement on this point. Objectively, the numbers for Vanacek and Schmid have not been good. Schmid has definitely had, the last couple of games he's played, has definitely had better numbers, but Schmid and Vanacek just aren't getting the job done, unfortunately. Now, when I look at how should a team play, how can we determine whether or not the goals that the goalie is allowing to be put behind him into the net are his fault, is I prefer to, instead of looking at the overall stat, his save percentage, his goals against, and I am well aware that Vanacek has some of the worst goals against in the league. I completely get that. But if I may bring up even our previous game against the Islanders, I think a lot of people look at the goalies and go, that guy let in 4 goals a game. This guy is not doing his job. But I'm sorry, when some of these goals, especially the last Islanders game, had a breakaway against guys like Josh Bailey. Or sorry, not Bailey, Barzal. Barzal? On a breakaway where the defense coughs it up. Or you've got cross creasers where the goalie's got to halftime Vanacek's flying across the net to make cross crease saves. And I get it that he hasn't done enough. But I feel like just to look at an overall and be like, oh, he lets in 4 goals a game, he must be bad, which I agree doesn't look good. But I feel like we have to start looking at goals individually, okay? What caused the goal? Was it a defensive breakdown? Was it a turnover by the forwards? Did the goalie actually shit the bed? Did he actually do a bad job? Because if he did, I'm more than happy to criticize the guy. But I feel like goalies, like quarterbacks in the NFL, get all of the blame and none of the praise. We constantly talk about the glories of Jack Hughes. We constantly talk about the glories of Jesper Bratt. We constantly talk about how good they are, how many points they get. But it feels like sometimes, even when goalies bail us out, and Vanacek and Schmid have bailed us out on several, I feel like they make 3 to 4 really great saves a game, but they get 0 credit for it. And I feel like there's no way to talk about goaltending anymore without people going, well, didn't he let in 4 goals a game? I mean, yeah, but are the goals that are going in his fault? Are the goals going in? Can we objectively go, yeah, he screwed up? And there definitely are goals where that's the case. And that's the thing that kills me when having these conversations about goaltending, is there are, of course, goals where it is objectively Vanacek or Schmid's fault. But sometimes I feel like they get all of the blame when half the time, or in my opinion, 70% of the time, the defense just hangs them out to dry constantly. And I feel like that doesn't get talked about. And it sort of sucks. Because, are they playing well enough? No. But, are they responsible for every single goal which goes in the back of the net? No. No, I don't think so. But yeah, and in terms of what we should do about goaltending, is there a trade we can look? I was looking into guys like Philip Grubauer, because I thought, oh, he might be an interesting guy to look at. He has a no trade clause. Do we go after guys like Saros? Do we go after Demko, who NHL.com today literally says he might be up for the Vezina this year? Who do you want to go after that's going to be better than Vanacek or Schmid? I don't know. Play the hot goalie is fine, but sometimes I feel like we just want to throw these goalies under the bus for absolutely no reason, or even for legitimate reasons, but then those legitimate reasons get buried under these guys just suck. Okay, so what's the solution here? Well, where do we go from here? Anyways, I'm going to call it a wrap because we are approaching the 25-minute mark of this video, and I did not mean it to be this long. So, that is our quarterly breakdown for the Devils. 20 games in. We've got a game against Philly. We'll see how that works out. And, yeah, that's going to be it for me, guys. Again, make sure to like the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not already watching. And I will see you guys in the next one. Adios.